Well, let's just jump right into our next piece, which is something you know a little bit about, Rania, and that is the ongoing situation in Lebanon, as people are also returning to their homes there in southern Lebanon in the context of the so-called ceasefire that was existing between Lebanon and Israel. But to get into all of that, we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show once again by Hala Jaber, who is an award-winning Beirut-based journalist and the author of Hezbollah, Born with a Vengeance.
Israel's history has been flowed with breaking ceasefires. It's not the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. Let me give you an example, Eugene. Over the last 60 days, Israel actually violated the ceasefire 1,350. So that's nearly 22 and a half violations per day in a spate of 60 days. And the so-called committee that was arranged when the ceasefire agreement was signed or agreed upon, headed by an American and then a French and UNIFIL and Lebanese, pretends that it is, calling out the violations sometimes, and yet does nothing. And they do have the power to reign in Israel, but Israel refuses, and they don't dare, do what we've always been saying for the last 15 months, forget Lebanon, even in Gaza, to stop Israel, to force Israel to stop from carrying carnage. Now, Israel's excuse is that it still hasn't, quote unquote, finished cleaning up the areas that it's still occupying. A lot of this is not true, because when we look at what they're actually doing, they're bombing what remains of civilian homes along the main, border envelope with Israel, or the border. And they're trying to ensure that they make it very uninhabitable, just like they did in Gaza, with the wish, or maybe they're hoping that in doing so, they would prevent people from actually coming and living there. They failed to create this buffer zone, which is what they wanted. So now they're trying to make it uninhabitable so that people won't go, and by default, that becomes a buffer zone. That's going to fail, obviously, as you've seen as well over the last few days.
Hella, I saw a statistic today that really stunned me. I think Sifid magazine put it together. Basically, they calculated that Israel has destroyed 7 times more buildings during the ceasefire than during the war itself, which means that 87.5% of the total damage to Lebanon's houses, businesses, and infrastructure was done during the ceasefire, which just shows the violations you're talking about. But also, what does this say about what Israel wants here? It seems obviously they want to create this buffer zone, right? And the whole idea is to create as much destruction as possible so people can't return, because they want a no man's land. Because for Israel, the threat when it comes to the Lebanese is having a population. But then can you talk a bit about what happened on Sunday? Because on Sunday, despite the fact that Israel was shooting at people still went back to their villages. So tell our audience what took place on Sunday and the significance of the fact that Lebanese people did what they did to get back to their houses.
Okay, I mean, we just have to point out something, that there was an agreement. It was for 60 days. There was never a discussion about prolonging, extending, or making it longer. So very late Sunday morning, or Saturday night, whichever part of the world you're at, Washington actually, that's the beauty as well. Washington actually announces, not Lebanon, not the main parties in Lebanon, but Washington itself announces that we, as in Washington and obviously Israel, extending till February the 18th. So another 3 weeks. As far as people are concerned, listen, Lebanese have been through wars with Israel, not once, but several times, many times over the years, and big ones over the last sort of decade or 2 decades. And they know what the Israeli intentions are. South Lebanon has been under occupation. There has been a security border imposed in Lebanon before 2000. And all that, didn't work. And the Lebanese were very determined. They know what the Israelis are up to. So they were very determined to go back and reclaim their land. Knowing as well, and that's very important to point out, knowing that the military, as in the Lebanese military, would not be able to do so, because the military has not been given permission to fight Israel. It's not been allowed to shoot at Israelis. So what happened on Sunday were the people of these villages and towns, the natives, if you want, the residents, those that belong there, decided, well, we're not waiting for Washington. We don't care, actually. Washington announced, but we haven't agreed. So they decided to go forth and reclaim their own villages. So what they did is a lot of villages that were still part of the, if you want, the occupation, that was still part of, post-ceasefire, Israelis are still there, decided that they will barge in themselves and open the way and force the Israelis to withdraw and allow the military, the Lebanese army, to come in as well and take control of these villages. Because one of the stipulations that it should be that the Lebanese army should control the south. Israel complains that the Lebanese army is not doing anything. Now, the Lebanese army's task is to take over that border, but as long as Israelis are there, they can't actually move in and do so. So we saw on Sunday, yes, some beautiful images, actually, of people that were resilient, of people that are steadfast, of people that are saying, actually, you can sign whatever agreements you want. We've done our bit, and now we're going back to reclaim. And no, Israel is not going to take control of this, whether physically or unphysically. And no matter how destroyed these villages are, we're going back to them because that's where we belong to. So on Sunday, you saw thousands of people. They parked and they start walking in different parts of South Lebanon, different parts of areas, different, and they were doing it slowly. Israel was also shooting and firing bombs at some of the civilians. On Sunday alone, we had 24 people, civilians. And this is the thing. They claim that they never shoot unarmed people. They never attack civilians. They never intentionally kill civilians. Now, on Sunday, it wasn't Hezbollah. It wasn't fighters. It was civilians going back to reclaim their territory, and they were shooting at them, and they killed over 24 people. They killed 24 on Sunday and injured over 100, and it was actually about 144 people. And that was just Sunday. And then you had Monday, people went back again. And on Sunday, people forced the Israelis to withdraw from 12 such villages. And on Monday, they went back again. And on Tuesday, they went back again. And every day now, they will go back and try and force the Israelis to withdraw. So what this shows us is that when you belong on a land, when the land is yours, when you're the native person or people of that land, neither Israel, nor Washington, nor the entire world together will actually force a people to be displaced, which is what we're seeing happening in Gaza. They're trying it in Gaza. They've tried it for 15 months. They turned it into rubble, into uninhabitable city. I mean, I haven't seen anything like this in I don't know when, and forever. And to think that this is happening now in 2024 and 2023 and 2025 is just ridiculous. And the world just sat by and watched. And they were doing that on purpose to make it so uninhabitable that the Palestinians will not be able to live there afterwards when ceasefires do happen. And the Palestinians did the same thing. You saw them as well in the last few days, walking back, a sea of people walking back to reclaim, to go back to rubble, but that's where they belong. That's where they feel they belong. Now, by contrast, what Israel is upset about, because this just goes to show that Israeli conditions or clauses for this particular war, whether in Lebanon or in Gaza, has actually failed. Don't get me wrong, they've destroyed a lot. It's been costly on both lives and infrastructure. But the Israelis, what they wanted to achieve out of this, Israel failed to achieve. It didn't finish Hezbollah. It didn't finish the Palestinians. It can't create the buffer zone it dreamt of in Lebanon, whereby it will continue to occupy it like it did pre-2000. Now they have to. And the settlers of northern Israel or from our south have not returned, and they're unable to return. And that goes to show there's different people who belong and will go back to rubble and set up tents and live, and people who actually don't belong. These settlers don't belong there. And they won't come and fight for it. So, and this is what Netanyahu is struggling with, that, the Southerners are actually pushing back to their villages, and the Israelis have not been able to go back to their areas, or their claimed areas, which are occupied territories anyway. So, yeah, the images are strong. And it's also a message to the Lebanese. If you want to sign agreements without our agreement, because we belong there, not you, you can't do it. We will reclaim our village the way we see fit.
I think that's such an important point to make, and it leads me to my next question here. I mean, a lot of people, I think, around the world are asking, there's a new president, a new prime minister in Lebanon, what to sort of expect in some of the political situation now as we move forward. I'm curious some of your thoughts there.
I mean, yes, you have people in Lebanon also claiming, for example, Rania has heard it, I've heard it a million times over. They say, Iran occupies Lebanon. What we actually saw in the last 15 months, and particularly in the last few months leading up to our new president and prime minister, is actually it's the United States that occupies Lebanon. And I don't mean physically, but the power, it's American. It's Washington. It imposes what it wants on Lebanon. So it decided that the president would be General Michel Aoun, who's, by the way, he's a good guy. I have nothing against him personally. I'm critical at the way he was brought in, just like the prime minister. However, having said that, and to be fair to the guy, he was the commander in chief. He comes from the south himself. He is a nationalist. He will not agree for Israel to stay one extra day in Lebanon. The Americans they appointed him. They suggested him as president for the next phase of Lebanon. But they're assuming also that they can control him and that they can impose on him. So he is also, if you want, stuck between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, his country is very important to him, and I don't think he will fail. I think one should give him the benefit of the doubt and time to see. But then you have the Americans with the stick above his head as well, because the military at the moment, our Lebanese army, is being funded and trained, and it's surviving because of American support, plus one Gulf country. So I think we will see, the Americans are waiting and we are waiting, every Lebanese is waiting to see how the new president and the new prime minister, and when he forms his cabinet, how they move forth, in particular with regard to South Lebanon. If they just, for example, at the moment we have a date, February 18th, when Israel should withdraw, okay? What if Israel decided it's not withdrawing on February 18th? And the Americans, again, make an announcement on behalf of the Lebanese, on behalf of Israel, that they're extending another month or another 2 weeks or whatever. Then what? Every time this doesn't happen, the Americans are actually weakening the guy that they brought in as president to lead Lebanon to the next phase, instead of allowing him to do what he needs to do in the country, which is reclaim his country, every territory, every inch of it, and be seen by the people on both sides that he is a man for the country first. If the Americans continue to do this, they would actually be weakening him, and there would actually be, I don't know, it's not going to look good for him, and he will lose trust in Lebanon amongst the population, in particular amongst the Shiite population from South Lebanon.
Hala Jaber, journalist and author of Hezbollah Born with a Vengeance, based in Beirut. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon. Thanks again. Have a good evening.